Hey everybody, welcome back to the Gains for Girls podcast. Today's guest is the running mate of independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's right, we're talking to Nicole Shanahan, his vice presidential pick. Super excited for this conversation. Nicole's an attorney, she's an entrepreneur, she's a lifelong Californian, she's young, which is certainly a unique element to bring to the political sphere. This conversation follows the conversation that Sage Steele had with both RFK and Nicole in separate conversations. Sage has been on the Gains for Girls podcast. I encourage you to go watch that episode. She is a role model of mine for a variety of reasons, but I thought what she did in her podcast, the Sage Steele Show, was just incredible. She talked to RFK. She asked him his stance on abortion. He said he had no problem with a woman carrying 9 months, the full term, deciding that last day that she wanted to abort her child. He had no problem with that, which this clip of him saying this went viral, understandably. But then Sage Steele interviewed Nicole, the same guest we have on the podcast today, and asked her stance, or what she thought of RFK's response when asked this question, which I think in a sense contradicted what RFK said. I encourage everyone to go watch this. But again, couldn't be more excited for mine and Nicole's conversation today. Of course, we will get into all things women's sports. We will talk about the issues of gender-affirming care. We will talk about big tech. We will talk about what's going on college campuses. Lots of great stuff ahead. So check out the interview here with Nicole Shanahan. Nicole, thank you so much for joining the Gains for Girls podcast. I was just telling you off camera, I could not be more honored and grateful to have you on. But I wanted you to take the opportunity to give a little background on yourself and how you and Robert F. Kennedy got connected in the first place.
Sure thing. Well, Riley, first of all, it's an honor to be chatting with you. Your leadership in this moment right now is so important, and I'm such a fan of yours. I am in awe of your bravery, and I am fully behind you in this journey. So how I met Bobby. All right. Bobby Kennedy is running for president as an independent, and I first heard about him about a year ago. I am a mother to a daughter impacted by chronic disease, and like all moms in this situation, I've been looking for a way to help my kid out. I'm trying to understand what's been going on with her and how it came to be that this baby girl that I gave birth to, who was healthy, all of a sudden started having all of these very serious health issues. And I have been aligned with researchers, scientists. I run a foundation that invests in scientific research, predominantly in women's health and reproductive issues. I don't fund artificial reproductive support, but I do fund trying to understand how to get healthy women healthier, how to help women overcome chronic disease. And so I had been in this space, and I had heard about Bobby's work as an attorney, oftentimes defending a lot of mothers and parents and families of children impacted by adverse reactions to pharmaceutical products. And I'm a lifelong Democrat here in California. It was something that always intrigued me, was this idea of participating in the political process. But to be honest with you, the last 8 years, I've grown increasingly tired with our two-party system, increasingly tired with the Democratic Party that I had given so much to over the years. And I could not, in my right mind, continue to support this group of people and the elitism within the party, and just the disrespect of young voices. I just couldn't handle the incredible lack of integrity within the party. And so I was looking for a new political home. And And I saw Bobby Kennedy running on the Democratic primary, and I got behind him because I believed that this was an individual who really cared about the American family, the American mother, and the American child. And he's been showing up for the American public for generations. I mean, 2 generations now. You know, he's 70 years old, and he's been at this for the majority of his career, over 40 years. I mean, that is something that I find to be worthy of a lot of support and respect in this moment. And when he decided to run as an independent, I was naturally very concerned. We've never had an independent, successful independent presidential candidate ever in American history. So this would be the first one. I actually believe more every single day that this is going to be our first independent presidential candidate that will be successful in November's election. So I've thrown the entirety of what I can do behind him. And when he asked me to be his running mate, I was very humbled. I was nervous, but I was very proud to say yes. Very, very proud to say yes, because there's an opportunity here in this moment to bring new voice to leadership that isn't conflicted out by some corporate interest, that really understands what it means to be in America today. It's different than it was 30 years ago. The issues, for example, what you've dealt with, Riley, this is new. Our parents' generation didn't have to deal with this. And so we need young voices in the White House right now guiding us through this moment. And I'm happy to speak on behalf of millennials, and of Gen Z, and of Gen Alpha.
Of course. I know. They just keep coming, huh? But you definitely offer that uniqueness in the political sphere as a whole, and being young and listening to you kind of speak to almost, I mean, of course, the polarization that we see across the country, speaking to how the left seemingly left you. Again, given the fact that you're a young woman, it reminds me of Tulsi Gabbard, who has just been a fierce and phenomenal leader. Whether you agree with her or not, I mean, it doesn't matter. She's really been just a phenomenal leader, which is something that we need more of in this country. And you mentioned the sports stuff, what has gone on, again, and the divisive nature that it has, where it's almost entirely fallen on party lines of allowing males into women's sports, women's locker rooms. Of course, we just saw the administration in the White House right now rewrite Title IX, the federal civil rights law that prevents sex-based discrimination on educational programs that receive federal funding, which is in total contrast to what President Trump has said, what he has said he will do if he gets into the White House on day one, and essentially reversing course of this. What does this look like from the presidential standpoint of what you and Kennedy would do in the White House?
Mm-hmm. I want to approach this as a woman who did play high school varsity sports. I competed in cross country and softball. I coached swimming, actually, for a summer league in Oakland, and I competed in college, not at your level, Riley, but I did compete in college cross country at my university. We were Division IV, but nonetheless, it gave me some insight into the incredible amount of responsibility student athletes take on. It is an enormous responsibility to juggle what is is essentially a near professional level expectation for competition, and as well as coursework. Being a college student, which is getting harder and harder every day. The demands are harder and harder on college students. And so I think that we need to understand before we start throwing around, these massive changes that just really fundamentally restructure how we think about these sports. We need to remember our athletes and who they are as people and the journeys they have been on since they were little kids. Since you were a little girl, you were working your butt off and you dreamed of competing at that level, and you worked and you gave your all. And those dreams are what make everything we endeavor and our passions powerful, to overcome our limits, to set new personal records. And so I want to always highlight that before we get into, what the president ought to be doing. When you are competing against someone who was born male, that was once a little boy who was swimming and dreaming of being a famous swimmer. And there's a reason why from a young age, little girls compete against little girls and little boys compete against little boys, because there's a biological fundamental difference. And that is something that we accept as a norm, because these are immutable, unchangeable differences, and they're sacred differences too. These are sacred differences, and we respect those differences. And so how did we become such a misguided nation that we've arrived to this moment where, if you're in college or after that point, we can somehow shift that narrative with such arbitrary, thoughtless carelessness? Doesn't make any sense. So what's actually going on? What is actually going on that there are now so many young people confused about who they are? What is going on that parents are capitulating to children who are fearful of puberty? I mean, let's be honest. Most of us are fearful of puberty. I was fearful of going through puberty. I remember that, right? I think most of us women were just like, this is really scary, like I've got breast coming in.
It's an uncomfortable time, to be 13, 14 years old in middle school nonetheless. It would be weird if you felt right in your body at that point in time.
Yes, it is completely the norm to feel uncomfortable about puberty. I would say safely that 100% of us feel uncomfortable during puberty. And so the fact that we have doctors, or that we are normalizing, addressing that with puberty blockers is a form of absurdity to me. And Bobby feels this way too, now that he had a chance to really dig into it. And I think we all have to just remember how we felt when we were 13. And, the answer is not blocking puberty. I mean, that is a form of absolute disgrace. The answer is helping our young people understand what they're going through. And that is very, very natural to question and explore that. But a child cannot consent. Their brains aren't developed. Our prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. Our prefrontal cortex, which has executive control of the rest of our brain, does not fully develop until our early 20s.
Right.
So to allow someone to even a child who doesn't really even fundamentally understand puberty itself to then be able to consent to understanding what a puberty blocker is biologically, and then
right.
A parent or a doctor who is taking that at face value and prescribing puberty blockers. I mean, that is gross negligence. It's gross negligence in parenting, and it's gross negligence from the medical profession. So, I think we need to address that. And that then fixes a lot of the upstream issues. I mean, what they've done with Title IX is a weird, messed up form of virtue signaling that has the opposite effect. And it has no place. It has absolutely no place in America.
Well, I'm happy to hear you say and really be so firm on all fronts. Kennedy, he went from saying that parents should ultimately have the final say and approval to these treatments, including puberty blockers and hormone therapy, to ultimately then kind of reversing course, as you mentioned, having dug into the topic a little bit more. I'm sure hearing from those around him, people who have been impacted, I think more importantly, by this movement, to saying, as you've communicated, this is something that should be reserved for individuals who are adults. And so you mentioned digging into this. I mean, what did that look like from y'all's perspective? And to speak to again, what President Trump has vowed to do, vowing to use the full power of the executive branch and revoking President Biden's, what he calls cruel policies and child abuse on so-called gender affirming care. Again, what does this look like under the RFK campaign?
Certainly there's power in the executive office. This should have never been an issue of Biden's to take on. It was incredibly misguided. We have to look at medical professionals and allowing all medical professionals to figure out what is proper in this instance. I mean, these are medical professionals that should be trained in childhood development, who should know that it is incredibly reckless to be it's even hard to say, but to be prescribing puberty blockers to children when they are going through, and we all go through identity crisis in middle school. My aunt used to call it the awkward years. She would say, "You remember when you were in your awkward years?" It is awkward for 100% of us. We've all been there. And for the medical profession to be ignoring something so fundamental to childhood development is the biggest problem. And so, for Trump, I commend Trump for taking a stand on this. Bobby as well is taking a stand on this very publicly now. And, certainly the executive office is a place that we need to course correct for what Biden has done. And so whoever is in the White House next year, whether it be Bobby or Trump, there is a guarantee that there will be a course correction of what I view as blatant executive office overreach in this situation. Biden is not a doctor. He is not working with childhood development experts on this. And, it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace that it's been turned into a political issue. And, Riley, the thing that I think is important for American politics to return to is really understanding how much is being corrupted in our political process for pandering to populations for votes, and a willingness to throw out common sense in those moments. And we cannot keep throwing out our common sense to pander to an election process. We've got to remember common sense has always got to come before party. Common sense has always got to come before, an election year. It has to be the thing that needs to come first in an election year, not second or last, or something that we'll fix once we're in office. Nothing about this speaks to logic. Nothing about this speaks to reasonableness, in the sense of, we have, there are a multitude of ways to address this. And Biden stepping out there and taking executive power and doing what he did. And Trump's response it makes sense, is meeting it head on. But I think Bobby's response is, let's actually get to the root of the issue here. That's what this campaign's all about. We got to get to the root of the issue and figure out what is going on with these kids at a young age, and what is going on with the medical profession.
Right.
And that's where we're going to spend all of our time.
Well, that's amazing. That's good news to hear. And I think something that certainly the overwhelming majority of common sense Americans who intuitively know that men and women are different, common sense Americans who understand their children are their children. They do not belong to the government. I think a lot of people will be happy to hear that. I wanted to get your perspective on what's going on these college campuses. We have seen this, seemingly a revolution on college campuses break out because of what's going on in the Middle East. We saw just recently where Columbia canceled their college graduation. These are students who, they delayed gratification. They stayed up late. They woke up early. They created friendships and personal relationships that will serve them for the rest of their lives, and ultimately for their university to come back and deny them of the proper and adequate celebration and recognition, that being college graduation. And so I kind of just wanted to ask you, what would you do if you were the president of Columbia in this scenario?
It's a real shame what's been going on across college campuses. And if it was all organic within these student movements, it wouldn't look like this. This is not an organic student movement by any measure. There's coordination. I saw this happen with BLM. I saw very, very well-intentioned people. I'd been working in criminal justice reform, working with all these community organizations, and then all of a sudden, BLM explodes into this national movement. And I've worked with community organizers. There's no single community organization in the United States that can move with that level of sophistication. So there are other players here. There is undoubtedly other players here. The same thing is happening on college campuses. I'll tell you, my little campus, University of Puget Sound, doesn't have this going on. This is only happening at the most elite institutions. So they are intentionally being targeted, and they are intentionally being politicized. Riley, I 100% I am a protester. So I'm an activist. When I was in high school, I led a walkout of my school and a peaceful protest to protest the war in Iraq. I was a junior in high school when 9/11 happened, and I was devastated for our country, and I mourned our country with everyone in the nation was mourning. And then when I saw the movement to go into Iraq, I was devastated as well. And I started the mourning as well. And I did the pamphlets. I led a peaceful protest. We were in partnership with the school. We walked 2 miles to our local radio station, and we gave interviews, and we had signs. And, this is what a protest in America is supposed to look like. What is going on these college campuses is not that. It's a far cry from that. And to escalate the message of war between Muslims and Jews is the wrong course of action right now. I think that I've seen one head of school make a very powerful statement and give students every opportunity to decide with peaceful protests and said anyone who is not peaceful protesting will be expelled. And that is fair. That is a very, very fair approach to this. Welcome peaceful protests and expel those that are not able to understand fundamentally what is expected of them as a student of this institution. As a student, and I feel this way, being a child of an immigrant, but we have a very high responsibility to act in peace and partnership with our fellow students. And as an immigrant, we have a responsibility to act in peaceful and productive relationship with our fellow countrymen. And we are a nation of immigrants. It is our responsibility to remember the immigrants that came before us and how they handled these moments in American history. There is no excuse for bringing anything other than that into this country.
Totally. Yeah, that's, again, it's strong to hear. My husband, he's an immigrant. He came over from Europe, from England. And it's been a struggle for him, as a hardworking, honest man who loves America. He loves this country, but even given the fact that we've been married 2 years this month, he still doesn't have his green card. So it's of course, at least speaking to the immigration side of things, what we have seen on that front has made it harder for people who do it the right and honest and ethical way that it should be done. One thing that I've been impressed with on the Kennedy campaign is your response to big tech and censorship. And so I wanted to ask you, what needs to happen? What does the government need to do to make Meta or Google stop censoring content? I guess more so places like those, how should they make decisions about what to and what not to censor?
It's been really disappointing to be in Silicon Valley and watch what's happened to some of these companies here. I was married to the co-founder of Google. We've been separated for over 2 years. We met in 2014. And, at the time we met, tech was for good. Google was the thing that helped me, get out of poverty. Like, it was the thing that helped me figure out how to apply to colleges, how to complete research papers when I couldn't get a ride to the library. So we have to remember how good tech once was in order for us to understand how far we've come.
Right.
Tech today has infiltrated every aspect of our lives. I just spent an hour and a half yesterday with an attorney talking about the Smith-Mundt Act, oftentimes called the State Propaganda Act, because it's $1 billion fund that goes through an agency called the USAGM, and they're allowed to create media, and it doesn't have to be labeled, and it can go out all over the world, including the United States, and it can pitch ideas on behalf of the government. And they're using social media. They're pitching ideas. The USAGM, the government, is putting out news in social media, and it's not being labeled as government-sponsored news. So, the role of these tech platforms today is exceedingly important. And it strikes me that many of these platforms have forgotten what the Constitution says and what our Bill of Rights say and what our First Amendment is all about. It's very, very troubling that the line between government media and private sector media has been so blurred. And, Bobby will say this, but if you look at what Citizens United did and you look at who the big funders are of, the Democratic Party today, those big, powerful funders are putting in tens, $50 million, $60 million, sometimes over $100 million into a political party. And what happens when that kind of financial relationship occurs is that there becomes this ranking system of who gets to call the shots within government and who gets the ear of our leadership first. And then the inverse is true. And then you have agencies now that are policing these companies and they're making deals with them. And some of those deals are like, well, you've done all of these things that people are upset about, but here's what we'll do. We'll try to work something out if you guys agree to X, Y, and Z. And so now you have this additional blurring that's happening. So it's this tug of war, this roulette almost of, with our liberties. We're gambling with American liberties so that these huge corporations are able to continue to operate without the government imposing restrictions and scrutiny on them. And that's not the kind of trade we ought to be making and promoting. That's the kind of trade that erodes at the very spirit of this country. We can't keep making those trades. So, this whole focus on ending corporate capture of our agencies and corporate capture of our political system is what Bobby Kennedy is all about. That's his primary platform.
Right. Well, again, it's wonderful to hear. I know we've extended our time, but I just wanted to give you, again, kind of an opportunity to speak to other issues, other debates, things going on that will be important to your campaign, to Kennedy's campaign, and what will be kind of that first action item if he gets to the White House.
Well, there are several action items. I mean, Bobby's going to be working on unraveling corporate capture from day one. And part of that is going to really impact, I believe, these issues around Title IX. Certainly taking executive action against Title IX is important, but I think we've got to get to the root cause of all of these things. And I think once we take Big Pharma out of treating our children, because, they're selling these puberty blockers. Who's making these puberty blockers? Pharmaceutical companies. So you got to follow the money. Right. And we're not going to let that continue. It is abusive to our children. It is abusive to our mothers. It is abusive to nature. And it's not right for these kids. I mean, now we're hearing from all of these kids who are now adults and they can't feel anything. Like, they can't connect because they literally have been pumped full of chemicals that have made it impossible for them to have these beautiful sensory experiences that are just foundational to enjoying being a human. And so I think, Riley, Bobby is going to get in there and we're going to get to the root causes of things. We're not going to keep, spitting hate at anyone. We're going to follow the money. That's what he's been doing his whole career. His entire career has been around this. He's the most set up for this incredibly arduous task. He's not going to back down. He's had every threat lobbied at him. He's not going to stop. And, I'm going to be right there, making sure he has all the team and support he needs to get it done. I'm going to be out there, just speaking on behalf of women, moms, families, supporting dads who are good family men. And I'm going to be out there helping you get to the root cause of many of these social ills that we are facing today. I want to see a healthy America again with clean food, clean soil, the food that you and I ate when we were competing. Again, you compete at a much higher level than me, so I don't want to make that comparison, but the food that powers young people to be successful in this world, I'm going to be working on that to make sure that we don't lose any of that in exchange for lab-grown crap. That stuff has no place on our family kitchen table in this country. So I really want to fight. It's something that I've been working on already, taking a stance against human engineering, I've been taking a stance against the manipulation of people to think that they must be reliant on the pharmaceutical company to save them. So that's what, that first week is going to look like when we get into the White House.
Well, those all sound like important things that need to certainly be addressed and dealt with. And so couldn't be more grateful for you for coming on, for really articulating all of your points, things that matter so beautifully and so well. And so we will certainly be cheering you on. Again, it's admirable when you have someone who can acknowledge, who can really just look at something and say, hey, this isn't right. And that's seemingly what you have done. And so we, at least speaking for myself, I really admire that. And so thank you. It's a great privilege and honor to be able to speak with you.
Riley, the pleasure's been all mine. You are a superstar. I am so proud to know you now. And I hope we can meet in person at some point soon. Thank you and good luck.
I don't know about you guys, but a lot of her answers surprised me. Definitely surprised me for the better. She was very firm, I would say, on the issues that we touched on. Definitely didn't sound like someone who was the vice presidential pick for an independent candidate. But to be fair, a lot of the issues that we touched on were definitely common sense issues. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Make sure you like and subscribe and comment anywhere where you get your podcasts. Make sure to check us out at OutKick.com. Hope you all you moms out there, had a wonderful Mother's Day this past week, and we will see you again next week. Thanks, guys.